2, the title of her oration, Out of the Garden.
Life can be brutal. It can. Life can be so stressful with work and your family and a million other little things going on all at the same time. For example, let's say you've got a big presentation due for work in only 3 days and you haven't even started it yet. So you go home ready to get to work, but right when you walk through the door, 2 young children come running at you screaming and crying, asking for milk and juice and cookies, all of which you don't have. And to top it off, you don't have any money to buy these things your children so desperately need. You're just thinking, Calgon, take me away. Or perhaps you'd like to retreat to a garden with beautiful flowers of all shapes and sizes and a blue sky stretching out for miles that you can just look at while feeling the cool breeze against your skin. Sipping honey. But then, just as you finally feel relaxed, you notice there are ants crawling around your feet and bees enjoying the same flower you are, while clouds conceal the sun threatening rain. What you're experiencing is very similar to what John Locke discusses in his second treatise of civil government. Locke imagined a state similar to the garden I just described. He called it the state of nature. In this state, all men are free and equal. No one can tell them what to do. Like our little paradise, Locke's state of nature sounds idyllic. In his garden, there was only one rule to follow: reason. Locke states that reason teaches all who will but follow it, that all being equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. It still sounds wonderful, doesn't it? However, not all men live according to the dictates of reason. Some act irrationally. And there were 3 things missing in Locke's state of nature that made these irrational men dangerous: a known law, an unbiased judge, and an executive power. With ants and bees invading paradise, with irrational men endangering our lives, our health, our liberty, and our possessions, perhaps we should move out of the garden. We were forced to flee the garden before. Do you remember a man named Patrick Henry? When George III acted irrationally by forcing the Stamp Act on the American colonists, it was Patrick Henry that warned George III of the penalties of tyranny. Caesar had his Brutus, and Charles I, his Cromwell. And then he continued amid cries of treason. George III made profit by their example. The colonial Garden of Eden had erupted into a state of war. And in this state, Thomas Hobbes, author of Leviathan, painted man's life as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, in short. It was during this war, the American Revolution, that Thomas Jefferson penned the greatest of American apologias, the Declaration of Independence. He espoused the American philosophy that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Continuing, he explored the rights by which Americans claimed their independence. He suggested that when force was used without reason, it is their right. It is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. And that's exactly what they did. Following the successful conclusion of the Revolutionary War and the uncertainty of life under the Articles of Confederation, Americans meeting in Philadelphia, men whom Thomas Jefferson called demigods, constructed the social contract which embodies the legislative, executive, and judicial powers Locke noted were absent in the state of nature. This elevated citizens of the United States out of the state of nature, out of the garden. The Constitution is divided into 3 different sections: the preamble, the 7 articles, and the 27 amendments, the first 10 of which are called the Bill of Rights. It is this document that helps create a political society capable of protecting us from the abuses found in the state of nature. This was more eloquently phrased by Governor Morris, whose stylistic flourishes helped ornament the preamble's powerful guarantees. The preamble explains how to create a better government than the Articles of Confederation. We created this document. We made it our sacred goal to create a better social contract between the government and ourselves. Our first contract, the Articles of Confederation, was mortally weak because it did not give the government the right to act directly upon the citizens. It only affected the states. Okay, so now that I've lulled you to near unconsciousness with a straight academic argument, let me show you just how topical the strength of the federal executive is. Within the last 2 years, the Dow Jones fell from a high of over 14,000 to a low of less than 8,000. People who had never bothered to consider just what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are cringed when packaged mortgages were mentioned. Workers lost their jobs, and the hopefully premature gloom and doomsayers whispered the dreaded question: are we headed for another Great Depression? Have you felt it? Have you sensed the hardships that lurk just beyond the next day, the next week, or the next year? If so, you can sympathize with Daniel Chase and his Massachusetts friends. Men who had served their country during their Revolutionary War, but faced the seizure of their lands, of their homes, of their futures. Their story not only points to the inherent weaknesses of the executive's ability to utilize force to repress insurrection, but also illustrates its impotence in helping the economically devastated poor. It is eerily reminiscent of the fate of the brave men and women serving so gallantly in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Although the issues are far too complex to address briefly, a quick juxtaposition of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation with the solutions to these faults embodied in the Constitution will evince its greater strength. Its capacity to defend more powerfully citizens' lives, health, liberty, and possessions. The Articles of Confederation allowed each state one vote in a unicameral legislature reflecting equal representation. Article 1 of the Constitution created the bicameral nature of the legislature described in sections 1, 2, and 3. These established Congress, which is made up of a lower house, called the House of Representatives, and an upper house, called the Senate, in which each state has 2 delegates. The second major fault of the Articles is that they did not establish a strong executive. The Constitution remedied this oversight in Article 2, Section 1, creating a strong presidency with a term of 4 years. The Articles also failed to create a national judicial system, so the delegates in Philadelphia wrote Article 3, Section 1, creating one Supreme Court and such inferior courts as they deemed necessary. Now, you're probably thinking that the delegates to the Constitutional Convention belted down one too many hot toddies before addressing taxation. After all, we all know that the way to any constituent's vote is through a tax cut. However, in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the delegates gave Congress the right to lay and collect taxes. Amendment 16, however, is often viewed as the bane of all who work so hard for so little pay. It states, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived. Yeah, I know, life is brutal. All of these articles, sections, and clauses seem like they represent an awful lot of work, and you're probably thinking that the garden, even with the ants, is a much better place to be than in a small room reworking the nation's social contract. But think about it. Can you imagine a country like the United States surviving for an extended amount of time without a George Washington to withstand the baneful effects of the Spirit Party, to use and control the competing geniuses of an Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson? Could we have survived the sanguinary Civil War without the firm, forgiving fortitude of an Abraham Lincoln? Not convinced yet? Have you heard of Marbury v. Madison? What about Brown v. the Board of Education? Roe v. Wade? If any of these sound familiar to you, and I hope they do, then think the 39 delegates whose commitment to their Constitution created the national judiciary. So the next time you feel yourself longing to escape with Calgon, or to slam the door on the kids and retreat to the garden, remember what Jean-Jacques Rousseau suggests in the social contract. Though man gave up his freedom and appears to be in chains, in reality, his greatest freedom exists when he participates in the making of his own laws. Laws which restrict his passions. Laws that make him more free than he was in the state of nature, in the garden. So join me